Are you from the area originally, Melvin? Or you?
I'm originally from Memphis, Tennessee, actually, and I came here in 1997 to pursue my undergraduate studies at Morehouse College, and
Mm, hmm
that was kind of the beginning of my career in general as well. And from there on, I went up to Rutgers after graduating for graduate school and stayed up in the North for about 4 years before returning to my alma mater, Morehouse, as the band director, as head band director. You can imagine tons of duties. And I was
Oh,
24 when I took that job. It was a bit
what?
of a culture shock. Yeah, it was pretty
24.
interesting.
Wow. That's
Yeah, I
amazing.
had to grow up really quickly.
Really quick.
And
That's
from there, I've since been in the Atlanta area. I resigned from that job in 2010, but I have since been teaching adjunct at various institutions. Now, full circle moment as an adjunct professor at Morehouse as well as Spelman College, and I do work at Georgia Tech and work at Georgia State, work at Emory, and I'm also adjunct at Spelman College,
mhm.
as well as various master classes and touring, and it's a busy life. Yeah.
Man, yeah, I was. It was just so cool. Penelope Williams was in,
Oh
and
yeah.
she was singing graces, and mentioned that you were performing and showed the video on her phone of your performance
Oh man.
on the
Yeah,
Oscars.
that's tough. Oh man, that's kind of hard to even describe. That was crazy.
Was that
That
your
was
first
beyond
time
crazy.
performing for?
That was my first time performing live there. I had to do some pre-recorded stuff
Mm,
for it a couple years back, but that was the first time actually being there in person, as well as doing some of the pre-records. So that
wow.
was pretty wild.
Yeah, what
It's,
was
it
your
was kind of
experience? And then you said that you had actually performed for the Grammys as well.
Yeah, yeah. And again, it's the first time doing that live. I've done some pre-records for that as well before, as well as for the Latin Grammys. But this is the first time actually being in the building, and that was just amazing. You know,
Wow.
COVID, of course, changed a lot of things. So I think I wonder sometimes if it would have happened sooner, were it not for COVID. But
Mm,
I'm happy that it happened when it happened.
hmm Definitely, definitely. No, that's. I was kind of curious just for you to share a little bit more about your experiences with those
Oh
performances
yeah,
and.
yeah. There's what was really interesting. So we can start with the Grammys. What's always interesting about that is for the last however many years, for as long as I can remember, I've been involved in projects that were nominated. And
Mm,
so being able to be in the building next to some of the artists that I played with who were on the ballot even this year, that was
mm.
kind of mind blowing. But I actually earned my first, without knowing it, I earned my first Grammy back in 1998 when I was a sophomore in college at
What?
Morehouse. Yeah, I had no idea, which is even crazier. But I performed one day. It was after marching band practice. The band director called myself and two other guys in to his office and said, "Hey, we need you to head over to the studio and do this recording with TLC." And at the time, I thought TLC meant like the Learning Channel, so I was like, "Sure, we'll go and do it." And he meant like the singing group was the actual
Right.
TLC. And
Wow.
we got to the studio, and one of the songs that came out of that was "No Scrubs" on the record Fan Mail.
Mm,
And
mm.
it was really trippy then. I was like 18, 19 years old, riding down the
Oh,
street, listening to my
wow.
radio, listen to radios, and the song came on. And that's when I realized that this could be a career. This is something that I could do for a living.
Hmm
But I didn't know then that project went on. It went like triple platinum a couple times, and
Oh,
it sold more records than anything at the time worldwide, and it earned like two or three Grammy nominations, and I think won one or two of those Grammys. And
wow.
I guess that was my first experience with the union as well because they signed us up that year as a condition of doing the recording. And so
Okay.
after doing the paperwork,
Mm,
it was funny to me to receive what we call mailbox money for the
right.
first time for work
Okay.
that was already done, and
Right. Right.
that yeah, and y'all
Residuals.
been great with that. Yeah, yeah, those royalties from that have flowed since 1998 all the way up until this year, which is
Seriously,
amazing to me.
that's great.
Yeah, that
That's great.
project it just went a really long way. And then movies, and I guess when they did a biopic about the group, that kind of reset the clock on some things with that particular project. But that particular experience was my first kind of introduction to the music industry as a professional.
Mm,
Before then, I played for my church. I did some local things. I might have did some things on behalf of the school, but I didn't know that it was a viable like career option until that opportunity came. That's when I realized like this is much more than people make it out to be.
it's well, what an amazing initial experience to
Oh
have
yeah, yeah.
as a young person. That's just incredible.
Oh, man. Yeah, and I didn't find out about that Grammy until maybe 3 or 4 years ago, which is
Oh,
crazy. It's just
really?
like the name was on the roster, just floating around, and I've since I serve on the Grammy board here as well, on the
Okay.
governor's board, and it was just funny that it took that long for me to realize that that was out there, and so it forced me to track down the others, and I
Mm,
have it's a really long list of those things that I just was
mhm.
completely oblivious about. I just kind of kept my head down and did the work as the
Right.
work came, and
Yeah.
it's just a rewarding career, man. So going to the Grammys after having so many of those plaques, a couple on the wall here, after having so many of those little
I,
plaques,
I see that
it was
foil.
really cool. Yeah, yeah. So it was really cool to connect the dots and to to see some of the people in person. And after COVID, the way it's been, so much of my work was digital for the
Mm,
last few years. So
mhm,
this was the first opportunity to reconnect with a lot of the musicians that I've been
mhm,
working with for the last 2 years, and
mhm.
actually meet some of them for the first time face to face.
Well, and I was stalking you a little bit online, and because I had the real pleasure of getting to meet Mace Hibbert a bit and doing some work with him, and
Yeah,
I saw
yeah.
that he was on the Corona. Is it Corona Tet? Um,
Yes,
did
yeah,
he?
those were fun.
Yeah.
That was our release really early on in lockdown. It might have been the first month of lockdown. We just decided to reach out to a couple friends. We had intentions of recording anyway, that
Mhm,
were of course foiled by everything that was going on. And so it was a matter of first making sure that my friends all had their own kind of recording setups. And for those that didn't, I kind of, I lent a little bit assistance or guidance in getting what they
mm,
needed to get.
mhm.
And for one or two of the people who did not have it, I just went over to their houses and recorded them. And so
Oh.
it just worked out great in the end. Everyone, we had no idea how it would come together because when we did it, it hadn't been done just yet. So there was no
Mm,
real framework or guidance as to how to work this out. Uh,
right.
I just,
Right.
I just knew I wanted to do it, and because I'd done so much digital work, I figured it was possible. And
Mm,
so it
mhm.
came out much better than I could have ever predicted.
I I was blown away by the mixes. I mean, it sounds, for it
Yeah,
being all remote, it just sounds like
right.
you all really were in the same room
I
together.
know, and it amazed us too. And one of the guys on the record, or one of the guys that recorded, he's a phenomenal mixing engineer himself, Marlon Patton.
Mm,
Um, and
drummer.
he's the person, yeah, he really was kind of he was kind of steering the ship as far as making it sound like we were all in the same room. But
Mhm,
what amazed both of us is the reactivity of everyone. Everyone essentially, when you're dealing with jazz, it's pretty much collective improvisation for the most
mhm.
part, and
Right.
it seemed that everyone was making adjustments or changing things at the exact same points in the
Mm,
song on their own. So by the
right.
time they combined, it just locked in like that. So it just felt like it had to be. It was just meant to be.
That's so well, and so true for it to have that feeling of spontaneity,
Right.
um, while all being recorded remotely.
Oh man, it was
That's
crazy. It was
yeah,
so crazy.
yeah.
I had to do it like 2 or 3 times just to be sure it wasn't a fluke.
Yeah. Well, and do you think that in terms of COVID and how
Mhm.
it kind of helped push it helped, you know, us just jump right into the pool, so to speak, of getting our remote recording
Yeah.
setup going. And do you
Yeah.
think this is a changed landscape now? I mean, is this something that has become
Yep.
standardized or?
That's a funny question because during lockdown, maybe for the first 2 or 3 months, it was the thought that this was going to be like a boutique type deal, or
Mhm.
maybe this was going to be kind of a novelty. But now it is 100% unavoidable. Since then,
Right.
even with the ability to get back, in contact with people, if
Mhm.
the budgets are not such that
Right.
in person, setting is that. I think this still leaves the option open for the quality to still exist, because I hate nothing more than hearing digital horns, on
Right.
a project as a horn player. So
Right.
I love that there's still a way to connect those dots, one way or the other. Of
Mm-hmm.
course, I always, like anyone else, I prefer live and in person, but I think the digital thing provides that option in a budgetary way that makes it something that's going to stick around for a while.
Yeah. Definitely with the shifting paradigm that we're in,
Yeah,
the more that we can get involved with, especially like as young folks. I
yeah,
mean, would you say this is almost an important piece of gear for
yeah,
any young musician,
yeah. And I
especially with the
encourage
audio
it.
interface and
Oh yeah, yeah. And I actually encourage it. What was funny is I encouraged it before COVID,
okay.
because it came on me maybe 10 or so years ago.
Hmm.
It was 2011, after I did my own project.
Hmm.
The engineer's name was Alex Lowe, extremely helpful guy.
Hmm.
Um, he basically showed me the ropes of what he was doing to record and mix and manage all of the tracks, and went a step further and kind of gifted me Pro Tools at the time.
Hmm.
And the getting it back then was different than it is getting it now. So I,
Hmm.
I didn't take it lightly. I
Right.
dove right in with the laptop I had. I went and bought an interface
Hmm.
and kind of introduced myself to it with his guidance, and really figured out the ropes early on. But
Hmm.
so I've been recording virtually, so to speak, since
Long.
2011. And
Oh, wow. Okay.
so by the time this happened, it just so happened that I was already geared up. And even when COVID hit, the same music director that called me in on the Grammys, his name is Adam Blackstone.
Hmm.
We were working with him on Sunday Best, filming here in town, and we just filmed the first of 6 weeks worth of programming for the show.
Hmm.
Then COVID, made its rounds,
Hmm.
and we were all sent home.
Hmm.
And literally the very next week, he just requested, "Hey guys, if you can, we want to finish the show virtually. So if you can record your parts, here are the tracks. If you can maybe even add a video to it, we'll see what they do with it." And it went over so well that director and that music director just kept the program going. From then on, we did like tons and tons of programming throughout COVID, completely virtually. And I think that just solidified for me that
Hmm.
everything that happened before just put me in a place to be ready for that. And no one could predict COVID, when it's all said
Right.
and done. No one could predict lockdowns. But
Yes.
I do have to say, this had to change the idea of most musicians when it comes to thinking ahead,
Yes.
of
Yeah.
whatever new technologies or techniques, whatever settings. Now I feel like that those conversations are much more prevalent in the musical community. Just as you asked that question,
Hmm.
it's a part of the scene now. It's
Yeah.
not avoidable, and I'm looking now to see how that's going to translate to the live performance scene, because I wonder if more concerts will remain virtual, if they'll somehow perfect that to the point that that becomes another, like, because it doesn't generate the kind of income that live
Right.
performances do. You don't have a bar,
Right.
you don't have wait staff, you don't have parking, you don't have
Mm.
food considerations, all of those other things that are considered,
Mm.
income generating of the live scene.
Mhm.
So I just wonder how this is going to translate in the future. If they're going to find a way to circumvent that, or if they're going to raise the expense of virtual concerts to make up for the loss, because it is still a loss to the scene.
I mean, definitely it has shifted in a
Yeah,
way. And that was kind of the one of the other questions I was curious to just ask is, where do you see the music industry headed now, that we're 2 years into this pandemic, and
right.
specifically in Georgia too.
Yeah.
Where's the music industry headed in Georgia?
What's interesting is when you talk about the industry itself. I mean, there's always been the live and the broadcast.
Hmm.
There's been that separation, and I feel like those two lines are kind of blurred at this point.
Hmm.
But what I see happening, that was kind of a prediction a year ago, is your major artists on their return to the stage are vying for the exact same venues as your local artists. So now these stages that may only seat between 300 and 1,000 people, you have the largest act coming into town just looking to get back on stage, going
Hmm.
to that place, filling that place up, which would normally seem more reserved for your local artists. And so I I think that's going to be interesting to see how it plays out, because
Mm.
either A, the market's going to be flooded with big artists doing smaller venues, or B, the smaller artists are going to have to step up whatever is considered to be their particular game to
Mm.
compete with these major shows. And I don't know, I just don't know how that's going to play out just yet,
Hmm.
because it's kind of difficult to say your local artist can compete with, say, a Jill Scott
Right.
at
Right.
the stage. You know what I mean? And that's completely, that's not the actual scenario. But just to say that an artist of this caliber is now on the exact same bill as an artist, that's just breaking into the field. I hope that what that does is change how the local artists approach their own business aspects. Maybe
Mm.
they'll ask for a little more and provide a little more at the same time. Or
Mm.
I hoped, in the end, in the beginning, we were all hoping that maybe the venues would step up how they dealt with the artists.
Mhm.
Because for the longest, the complaint for the performing artists was that the venue put way too much weight on them to handle things such as advertising and to handle their own fan bases coming into the doors, as opposed to the venue having a built-in following. So we always had hopes that that maybe the bigger side of the equation would step up the game and how they deal with the independent artist.
Mm.
So I don't even know what the prediction would be with that, because as much as I would like to say we're done with COVID, we're clearly not.
Yeah.
And then you add on other economic woes that the country is facing. So I don't know. The music industry has always been kind of a catch-all for whatever's going on in the rest of the world.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
No.
yeah,
It's kind of a yeah, it's a filter into which we can kind of take a test on what exactly what the barometer is telling us.
right.
Um, but it's so interesting you say that, where with these more smaller to medium sized venues. Like, for
Yeah,
instance, I actually went to see I went to City Winery last night for the
yeah,
first time here. I've been here now about 2.5 years. Got to see Jake Shimabukuro, who's this virtuoso ukulele player from
yeah.
Hawaii. Absolutely outstanding. What a wonderful
International
performer.
artist.
Oh my gosh, he's ridiculous. But it's such an interesting thing that you mentioned, that the local artists kind of are vying now for the same kind of
Yeah,
point, that like a Jake Shimabukuro, who is more on the international performance circuit.
right.
You know, maybe that's a good thing.
Maybe. I
Because
mean,
like you
there's no
said,
way to tell yet. Yeah.
yeah. I guess time. So maybe time will tell.
Maybe time will tell, because the world again, because the industry is kind of the catch-all for what goes on in the world. The world is still adjusting and trying to figure out what its new normal is.
Mm.
So even when you're dealing with international performance and international travel, the restrictions have changed from what they used to be. I
Hmm.
mean, and I say that, I say that kind of hesitantly, because there's always been vaccine requirements to travel overseas. And so,
That's
you know,
true.
I remember years ago getting called to do a show in Ethiopia. And so the string of shots and vaccinations and trials and things that you have to go through to go, I went through all of that, and then like a week or two before the gig, it got canceled, and I was so mad. I was like, "Yo, the malaria shot really took me out." So I was joking with my wife at the time. I was like, "Yeah, I'm going somewhere where they have malaria, because I
Did
would
you
not
go?
waste this pain." No, no, I think I got the West End, and that was it. I didn't make it very far, but it's just
Uh,
the idea, that's always been a part of it. But now the restrictions, depending on where you want to go. And then you have turmoil, you have civil unrest in certain places that
yeah.
wasn't the case before COVID. So it's difficult to make like predictions,
Yeah.
because like we're literally on the receiving end on
Mm.
what the rest of the world has to deal with. And our industry in the end is a service oriented industry. And
Yes.
so, as you serve the people, you can only serve them as much as they can consume. So, if people don't
Mm.
have money to spend, then there's not much that's going to happen. So
Yeah.
it's going to be interesting to see how that changes the dynamic, because no matter where the price of shows goes, the price of gas is still
Right. These
the price of products is still the price of just shipping regular things from one side. We're it's all connected. So I just wonder how one is going to impact the other, because cost of living is definitely not changing.
It's volatile, and I
Yeah.
guess another, like, I have just a couple of questions here,
Oh
but
yeah,
one
yeah.
of them was specifically for young people.
Hmm.
To your point, how do they prepare for this uncertainty? How do we stay malleable in your eyes? What does a young
Yeah.
musician do?
It's funny because when I was a young musician, a lot of the other young musicians were stepping into leadership roles. And so now the calls that I get come from these guys who are the leaders in different areas of the industry. It just so happens we came into the industry together. So I wonder what to tell someone whose life is dependent on waiting on a phone call. I would
Mm,
instruct them to not be that person because
mm,
this is not a good time to wait. I think that's the best
mm,
thing. And if nothing else, this entire experience has given people an idea of reaching for more than they thought they could. If nothing
mm,
else, even people that are stepping into the digital area, that wasn't in their purview before. But
mm,
now it's like, now that it's a requirement, what I found is some people have gone into the digital portion and found that they, flourish so well there that they've changed their careers from being musicians to just being, say, just computer engineers. I've
right.
seen, and I'm
Mm,
an educator as well. There's this,
right.
it's an unfortunate trend, but there's been a mass exodus from education, from
Hmm.
especially in the public sector, to where these teachers have, for the most part, flocked over into tech.
Hmm.
And so
Really?
what I would tell young musicians now is, if you love it, then you have to treat it as if your competitor loves it more. There's this,
Mm.
if you want to be great, every hour you don't spend practicing, your competition is practicing. If you have to be able to record yourself, your competition already has their interface. That's kind of the way I have to instruct students these days,
Mm,
because it's still a very much viable career. The thing that has always been a part about our career is the community itself, is being in
mm,
contact with people, going to sessions, going to mixers and meeting people.
mhm,
That's the element that's changed now, because that's still important in order to work. And so I would instruct students to do whatever they can to be as visible as possible with the things that they're doing, so that
mm,
they can get into the scope of the people that will, eventually be the ones calling them for work.
mm,
And to also not take for granted the other young musicians next to them, because you never know who your next boss or your next employee is going to be.
mm. That is so true. That is so true. Just to have a positive attitude, right?
Right.
To just show up and
Yeah.
do the
All the
good
basic
work.
stuff. Yeah.
No, this is amazing, Melvin. Thank you so much
Oh,
just
yes,
for being
indeed. Yes,
here
indeed.
today. And you know, I one last question,
Yeah,
if
yeah.
you have just a few more
Yeah, I
minutes.
got I got plenty of time.
Um,
Yeah.
upon my little bit of internet stalking of you, which I
Okay.
really enjoyed, getting to watch all of your videos and see
Yeah.
just how active you are, and anybody, please go check out Melvin, and all of his music that he's been doing, especially during the pandemic, staying active.
Crazy.
It's been
Crazy.
amazing. I just love this quote, that you have on your website:
Oh,
"Good
okay.
times connoisseur."
Yeah, that's pretty accurate. That's very accurate.
And
You
I
know,
wanted you to just speak on that for a bit.
I started saying good times in high school. It was back in the early '90s,
Hmm.
and I wish I had the wherewithal to get that phrase patented, because I thought I was the only one saying it back, and now it seems like it's everywhere. But
Hmm.
I essentially, it has multi purposes. I have this philosophy essentially that no matter how well or how bad things are going, or let's
Hmm.
just stick to the bad side, because there's a lot of bad going on right now. No matter how terribly the situation might be, I can only allow myself to dwell in that for so long before I just make the decision to get out. You know,
Mm.
and that's what good times is about. It's about reminding me of just that. Even when it's like, oh, the car won't start. Good times. And it almost seems sarcastic, but in the same token, it's just reminding me. It's like, all right, the car's not starting. I'm not going to sit here till the end of time in this car that won't start.
Right.
Eventually I'm going to have to figure this out, because I still have to go somewhere. And
Mhm.
so, it's just that idea of not dwelling in what's wrong. And even when things are right, it's even harder sometimes to notice when things are right, because
Mm.
you get so used to, you get so used to the difficulties and the challenges that by the time things are coasting, you might not recognize your blessing or your open
Mm.
door while it's in front of you. So just kind of saying it constantly just keeps me, it kind of self motivates me
Mm.
just to keep moving. Because it's this career is so full of ups and downs. You got some really high hills and some extremely low valleys. And so
Mm.
I feel like just reminding myself that it's all still good times in the end just keeps me on a nice plateau in between it.
Mm. Wow. Wow. Yeah, that is just, I mean, it living to your fullest potential through
Yeah.
that.
Oh yeah.
It's I I dig it. I dig it. I really, especially now with, like you were saying, so many peaks and valleys.
Oh yeah.
We
Yeah.
we we can turn any negative thing on its side,
Hmm.
and it becomes positive.
Oh yeah. And I've lived long enough and through enough things to know that sometimes sometimes the outcome of certain situations is just based on how you react to it. You know,
Mm.
you can be in you can be in a disagreement with somebody. If you react in that disagreement in a way that only addresses your own view of it,
Mhm.
then that could heighten the conflict of it all.
Mm.
But if you react to that disagreement in a way that acknowledges, it's like, hey, I might not agree with you, but I understand that that's the way you feel. So if that's a hot button, then I'm not going to react in a way that's going to make that hot button hotter. I'm not going to ignite that particular flame. Then that changes the way that situation goes and gets you closer to a resolution without actually sacrificing your view.
Mm.
So
Mm.
I think that's
Bigger
the way. Yeah,
and bigger than just the music industry. This is being a
that's
human
life.
being on this
Yeah.
this green
And you know
planet.
what? If I were to give any single piece of advice to young musicians, I would tell them, and I say it all the time, that the most important thing you can do is just be a good human being.
Mm.
Because a lot of times, some of the opportunities that have come to me have been just because the other musicians hiring think it's okay to be around me. They think it's okay to bring me around the other people that they're going to work with, or they know I won't freak out around celebrities. It's just about being a good human being in the room. Because I know plenty of much more talented musicians in the world that are at home because of some weird personality quirks that might take them out of consideration. Maybe they play with Jan, or they got a wall of kitten calendars or something that just needs extra explaining that might keep them from working.
Mm-hmm.
So it's so important just to be a good human. You never know how far that's going to get you beyond. I mean, of course, you have to be talented. That's what opens the door. But for you to
Mm-hmm.
walk through that door repeatedly, you have to be the kind of person that they will invite back.
Mm-hmm. Yes, exactly. I believe it, and thank you for the affirmation. This is really also just good for me to hear. I mean,
Oh
this is what a
man,
powerful affirmation. Good times with
good
Melvin
time.
Jones.
Good
Yes.
time.
Woo!